What's up everybody and welcome to a new video. And in this video we continue to go over my notes for the editor in VS Code. And in this video we're going to cover code editing. And here the first note is about IntelliSense. So IntelliSense is VS Code's term for code completion features. And here the first note is about member lists. Namely, as you type, a list of possible completions pops up. So for example, if I type here an A, then we get this list here of possible completions. And at the front of this list, we have these symbols here, which indicate different types of completions. So for example, these are keywords, then here are functions, classes, and these are variables. And here I also have a link where you can see all the available symbols. So these are the symbols here, are methods and functions, variables, classes, and the keywords. Okay, so now let's get back to the notes. Then here the next note says or talks about the listed options in order. Namely, first there are options that start with the respective character. So these options here start all with the respective character. And then here at the bottom we have options where a subsection starts with the respective character. And a subsection can be delimited either by camel case, so here is a directory or not a directory, or it can be delimited by an underscore, so customer underscore address. And then if you continue typing the characters, then the list of possible completions is filtered down. So for example, if I type here then an S, then we are left with these options here. And here then the listed options in no particular order are options that match the exact sequence, either at the beginning or at the start of a subsection. So here, these options here match the exact sequence, so AS at the beginning and here at the start of a subsection, so stop async iteration. And then there are also options that contain the individual characters in the given order. So they don't contain the exact sequence, but only the characters in the given order. So this is this apps function here, for example, or this customer address, because we have here the A and then the S. However, then if I, for example, then type in O, then we only have these two options left, and customer address is not listed anymore because this O here is before the A and the S. Okay, so and then if you want to insert an option, then simply press Tab or Enter. So if I press here Enter, then we get this assertion error. So those are my main notes for member lists. Okay, so now let's go over the side notes here. And the first one states that member lists also support camel case filtering. So for example, if I type here an A, a lowercase a, then we get these options here. And if I type a capital A, then these errors here are listed first because they start with a capital A. Then member lists also work with dot notation. So for example, if I create here a list, so 1, 2, and 3, and then if I type numbers and then dot, then we get access to all the list methods, and this even works within a for loop. So for example, if I say for n in numbers and then n dot, then we get access to all the methods and attributes of these integers here. Okay, so then the last note is about that member lists also show the available parameters of a function. So for example, if I type print, then open the parentheses here, then these parameter hints open, and we talk about those in a moment. But let's now close them with escape. And now if I manually invoke IntelliSense with control space, then we get a member list with the respective parameters of this function here. Okay, so this is here now the first side note that I want to mention. So then the next note states that IntelliSense provides intelligent suggestions. Namely, this list here is, for example, not strictly grouped by types of completions or ordered alphabetically, but instead IntelliSense lists those options first that it thinks are most relevant based on different criteria. And in my opinion, this can get somewhat confusing sometimes because this list looks different to what you might expect. So for example, if I choose here ASCII and then type A again, then now all of a sudden these groups here are mixed up, and within this group the options are ordered in reverse alphabetical order, whereas in this group they are ordered in alphabetical order. And then if I here again choose another option and type A again, then the list again looks different. So this is what I mean, that it can sometimes be confusing as to what options here are shown. Okay, so with that now, we've covered all the side nodes, and with that then we have covered all the nodes I want to mention with respect to member lists. Okay, so then the next node is about quick info and parameter hints. And here, to show how to access them, let's import the random module. So import random, and then here let's call the random.sample method. And now to open the quick info, all you have to do is click this arrow here. So this opens then the quick info, and to open the parameter hints, you simply have to open here the parentheses to call the function. So this opens then the parameters. And then the similarities between those two are that both depict here the parameters and the docstring. So if I go back now to the quick info, here you can also see the parameters and the docstring. And then the differences are that the quick info, in my opinion, is more readable. So those parameters here also have syntax highlighting and a better formatting. And then also here, this window is resizable. And then the difference for the parameter hints is that here the currently selected parameter is highlighted in blue. So currently we need to specify the population. So for example, if I then put in here a list and then press comma, then this K here now gets highlighted, and that's what we have to specify next. Okay, so these are my nodes for the quick info and parameter hints. Okay, so then the next node is about tab completion. And by default, this is disabled. So if you want to enable it, then you have to go to the settings and then search for tab completion. So here's the setting. And now to show how that works, I've prepared here some code. And here, if I now type vary and then select the very long variable name 1, and now if I press tab again, it simply inserts a tab instead of cycling through those options here. So if you don't want that, then enable the setting here. And then now if I type vary and select very long variable name 1, and now if I press tab again, then you can cycle through those different options here. Okay, so this is tab completion. So then the next node is about tooltips. Namely, you can hover over variables, functions, classes, or module to see the respective tooltip. So therefore, again, I've prepared some code. So here then, if I hover over this list, I get the tooltip for the list. If I hover over the I can see that. I can also hover over this print function here, or I can hover over this module, or over this class here. Okay, so those are the tooltips. Okay, so now let's go over the side note here, which states that the automatic pop-ups can be turned off. Therefore, you need to open the settings and then here go to text editor and then suggestions. So these are then all the settings related to those suggestions. And one that you might want to disable is this quick suggestions setting here. So for example, if I type here PR, then I get this pop-up with these respective options here. And now if I turn this off, so let's turn this off. And then again, if I type PR, then I don't get this pop-up. Okay, so that's one setting. Another one that you might want to disable is further down here. And this is this suggest on trigger characters. So therefore, let's create here simply a variable. And now if I type a dot, then again, we get this pop-up here. And if you don't want that, you can then disable the setting here. So now if I press the dot, then we don't get this pop-up again. And then another thing that you might want to change are the parameter hints. So for example, if I type here print and then open the parentheses, then again, we get this pop-up here with the parameter hints. So to disable them, you need to here search for parameter hints, and then here parameter hints enabled. If you disable that, then you don't get those pop-ups. So if I again open the parentheses, this time you don't get the pop-up. And then lastly, the last thing I want to show are the hover. So if I hover over this print function here, we get this tooltip. So if you also want to disable that, simply here search for hover, and then here the setting is hover enabled. So if I disable that, now we don't get this hover here anymore. So now with all those things enabled, the way that you can then access or still access those is then with keyboard shortcuts. So for example, if I type PR and then press Control Space, then I get here this member list. If I press it again, then I can open here the quick info. So okay, you can toggle that on or off with Control Space. Then to get the parameter hints, you have to press Control Shift Space. So this way we also get here the parameter hints. And then lastly, if you want to see the hover, then put the cursor on the function here and then press Control K, Control I. So this then gives also this hover. Okay, so now with that, we have covered all the points that I wanted to cover with respect to IntelliSense. So the next point is then about the code actions. Namely, code actions are indicated via a light bulb. And to show that, I've prepared here some code. So let's paste this. And here, for example, if I put the cursor on sample, then we see here this light bulb. If I put it on some variable, then we also see it. However, if I put it here on power, then we don't see it. And then if I select here the whole for loop, then we also get this light bulb. However, if we only select part of that for loop, then we don't see the light bulb. Okay, so then here, the next note states that if you click the light bulb, then you see the available code actions. And there are two different types. There are quick fixes and refactorings. So let's first look at quick fixes. So therefore I've prepared some other code. So let's paste this. And here if I put the cursor on math and then click the light bulb, then here we can see those quick fixes. So here let's simply remove the unused import. Then if I put the cursor on sample and click the light bulb, then we get these quick fixes. So here let's simply add this import statement. And then lastly here, if I put the cursor on world, written with this T. And for this example, by the way, you need a spell checker extension. So here if I click the light bulb, we can simply fix this typo. Okay, so those are quick fixes. Okay, so now let's get to the refactorings. And here there are three types. So let's start with extract method. So therefore I've again prepared some code. So here let's say that we want to put this part of the code into its own function. So let's here click the light bulb and then simply extract method. And then here you can provide the function name. So let's call this add1. And then here the function is also called. So then the next refactoring is to extract a variable. So therefore I've prepared this code here. So this calculation. So let's say to make this code more readable, we want to put this calculation here into its own variable. So therefore let's click the light bulb and then extract variable. And then we can provide the variable name. So let's call this investment result. So this is then our investment result where we calculate it, and then we can round it. And then lastly, the last refactoring is move symbol. So therefore I've prepared this code. And here then if I put the cursor on user and then click the light bulb, we have these two options here, move symbol to or move symbol to a new file. So let's move it to a new file. So now this adds this import statement, and here this file was created. So here's this variable. And now let's also move this variable into that file. So let's move symbol to, and here you can specify to which file you want to put it. So let's put it in user pi. Okay, so those are the three available refactorings. Okay, so then let's go over the side notes here. And the first one is about the rename symbol action. Namely, if you right click a symbol, then you can here choose rename symbol, and here you can give it then a different name. So for example, let's call this here then user underscore name, and then press enter. And then this variable gets here renamed, also in this import statement and also here in this other file. And this rename symbol action also affects file names. So for example, if I rename this user here, rename symbol, let's call this config, then you can see that this file here was also renamed. Okay, so that's rename symbol. And then the other side note is about the refactor preview. Namely, here if I again rename now user_name, like it says here, if you want to rename it, press enter, and if you want to open the preview, then press Control Enter. So let's rename it back to user and then press Control Enter. So this then opens here this refactor preview in the panel, and here if you click an entry, then this opens the div, and here you can also toggle on or off the different changes. So for example, you could toggle this on off, even though it doesn't really make sense. But now if we apply that, then here username doesn't get renamed. Okay, so those are the side notes. And with that, now we have covered all the main notes that I wanted to cover with respect to the code actions. So then let's go over the side note here. Namely, it states that the light bulb can be turned off via the settings. So therefore, let's open the settings. And here, let's simply search for light bulb. And here is the setting with which you can enable or disable it. So for example, if I put the cursor now here on username, we get this light bulb. And if I turn this now off, then we don't get this light bulb anymore. And however, you can still invoke it manually by using the respective keyboard shortcut, which would be then Control period. So this way then we also get those quick fixes. Okay, so now with that, we've covered all the notes that I want to cover with respect to the code actions. Okay, so now let's get to code formatting. Namely, VS Code has built-in formatters for JavaScript, TypeScript, JSON, HTML, and CSS. And the available format actions are format document and format selection. So now to show that, I have prepared here this JavaScript file. So here there are simply two for loops, and now if you want to format this document, simply right click into the document, and then here is the command to format the document. And this is also available obviously via the command palette. So now let's format the document, and then as you can see, both of these for loops here get formatted. Okay, so now let's undo this again. And now to show format selection, let's format just the second for loop here. So therefore let's select that. And now if I right click that, here then there's also this format selection option. So now if I run this, then only the second for loop gets formatted and not this other for loop here. Okay, so then here I also have a side note, namely not all formatters support format selection. Okay, so those are the format actions. But formatting can also be triggered based on user gestures. And to enable them, you need to open the settings and then here search for format on. And then you have here these actions to format on save, format on paste, or format on type. So let's first look at how format on save works. So therefore, let's simply here delete the second for loop. And now this file is unsaved. So now if I save it, then nothing happens. And now if I enable the setting and here press enter, so now the file is unsaved again. And now if I save it with Control S, then it gets automatically formatted. Okay, so let's undo this. And then here as a side note, when files autosave is set to after delay, the file will only be formatted when saved explicitly. So for example, if I turn on here autosave, and then here if I again enter a new line, and when it then automatically saves, then this doesn't get formatted. It only gets formatted when you save it explicitly. So when I press Control S, for example. Okay, so let's undo this again. So that's format on save. Then here is format on paste. So to show how that works, let me here cut this for loop. And now let's simply paste it. So that then again, nothing happens. And now if I turn this on and cut it again and then paste it, then you can see that it gets automatically formatted. Okay, so this is format and paste. And here I also have a side note, namely, not all formatters support format on paste, because to do so, they must support formatting a selection. And as I said earlier, not all formatters support format a selection. So then a workaround would be to enable format on save and then simply paste and save the code. So to show that, so let's disable format on paste again and then enable format on save. So now let's first undo this. So now if I cut this, then what you can do, then paste and then simply save, and then it automatically gets formatted. Okay, so again, let's undo this. And then the last user suggestion is format on type. And to show that, I have prepared some other code here. So if I paste that, so here, if I put the cursor into these braces here and then press enter, then you can see that this part here doesn't get formatted. And now let's undo this. And now if I turn this here on, format on type, and put a cursor into these braces and then press enter, then you can see that this here gets automatically formatted. Okay, so those are the 3 different types of user gestures that you can have. Okay, so then the next note states that additional formatters can be installed via extensions. So for example, if I go here to the extensions and then search for prettier, then we can install this as an additional formatter. And if you have multiple formatters installed, then you need to set a default formatter. And you can do that for a specific language or for all languages in general. So let's first look at how to do that for a specific language. Namely, therefore, let's again here use our 2 for loops. And now if we try to format this document, we get this message where it says that there are multiple formatters for JavaScript. So then we need to specify a default formatter. So let's do this. So here we have the 2 options, prettier, which we just installed, and then here TypeScript and JavaScript language features. So those are the built-in formatters. Okay, so let's pick prettier. So then you can see our document gets formatted, and here we are just using 2 spaces because that's what's defined in prettier. And here, just as a side note, you can also still use those built-in formatters. So for example, if I select this second for loop here and then right-click that, then here you have the options format document with or format selection with. So if I pick this one, then here you can select a formatter. So for example, if I then choose this TypeScript and JavaScript language features, then here we are again using 4 spaces. Okay, so this is how you can set a default formatter for a specific language. And now let's see how we can do it for all languages in general. Namely, therefore, you need to open the settings and let's put them over here. And then let's search for default formatter. So here is the setting. So now here let's set the default formatter for all languages to TypeScript and JavaScript language features, so the built-in ones. And now to see them in action, I've prepared this TypeScript file here. So now if you format that, then you can see here we are using 4 spaces because we are using those built-in formatters. And if I go back here to this JavaScript file and undo the formatting, if I again format this document, here we are using those 2 spaces. And that's because a default formatter specified for a specific language has precedence over the default formatter specified for all languages. Okay, so these are my main notes for this node here. Okay, so now let's go over these side notes here. And the first one is about changing the default formatter for a specific language. Therefore, simply go here to the settings editor, then here click also modified in JavaScript. And then here you can specify a different formatter. So for example, let's use this built-in formatter. And now if I format this JavaScript file, then you can see we are again using 4 spaces because we are using those built-in formatters. Okay, so this is the first side note. And then the second side note is about deleting an entry for a specific language. Namely, you can't do that in this settings editor here. And to show you that, let's set here simply this formatter here to none. And now if I click into another editor, then you can see it jumps back to TypeScript and JavaScript. And that's because it automatically inherits whatever is set as a default formatter for all languages. So for example, if I set this here to prettier and then go back here to JavaScript, then you can see now it's also prettier. So now to really delete that, then you need to go to this settings.json file and then here delete this respective entry for JavaScript. So if I delete that and now go back to the settings editor, then you can see now it's actually set to none. Okay, so this is the second side note, and with that now we've covered all the notes that I want to cover with respect to code formatting. Okay, so now let's get to these side notes here. And the first one is about linting. And my definition for that is that linting highlights syntactical or stylistic problems in your source code that might lead to errors. And those problems here are indicated via squiggly lines. So to show that, I've prepared here some code. Let's go back to a Python file and then paste this. So you have a blue squiggly line for infos, a yellow one for warnings, and a red one for errors. And then here the next note is that the problems are specified by which language services, by linters, or via configured task. And here, just as a side note, you can actually specify if a problem gets treated as an info, warning, or error. So for Python, if you want to change that, then go to the settings and then search for Python override. And then here you have this diagnostic severity overrides setting. And here, if you click edit in settings.json, then you can override these different problems. So for example, let's search for undefined variable and let's set this to an error. So by default, it's a warning. That's why this here is has a yellow squiggly line. And now if I set this to error, then it changes to a red one, as you can see. And now if I delete this setting again, then again, this yellow here, this line here becomes yellow. Okay, so this is this node. And then here I also have a side note, namely the status bar and problems view provide additional information about problems. And I will put the link to the respective videos where we talk about the status bar and the problems view into the video description. Okay, so now then here the last note states that different linters can be installed via extensions. So for example, for Python, you could install the Flake 8 linter. So if I install that and then here go to this file and open now the problems view, then you can see here in file.py, this error here gets detected by Pylance, which is this rich language service here. And it also gets detected by Flake 8. So you can run multiple linters in parallel, or you can also just disable or uninstall the ones that you don't use. Okay, so these are the notes that I wanted to mention with respect to linting. So then the next side note is about multiple cursors and selections. And to demonstrate that, I've prepared again here another code example. And here the different options that you have are to add a cursor via Alt plus click. So for example, let's say we wanted to insert here another entry in between ID and user. You can do that then with Alt click. So for example, if I put here the cursor and then hold Alt and then click here and here, then we can now add another entry. So let's say, for example, achievements, and then none, and then comma. And now we have created this another entry. Then the other option here is to add a selection, and you can do that via Alt plus double click or Alt and drag. So for example, let's say we want to rename here the user to username. Then we can select this first user, and then we can add these other users here by holding Alt and then dragging or double clicking. So now let's rename this to username. So that's adding a selection, and then we also have here column selection or box selection. So this you can do with Shift plus Alt plus click or Shift plus Alt plus drag. So let's say, for example, we want to delete this achievements entry here again. Then you can simply hold Alt and Shift and then select here everything or drag, or you can also do it via click. So if I click here in the top left corner and then hold Alt and Shift and click in the top right corner, then we can select everything of that. So then let's delete that. And then to return to one cursor, simply press Escape. So now we have here one cursor again. And then here the side notes are that you can change the modifier key for applying multiple cursors to Control instead of Alt. And you do that via the menu bar here, selection, and then switch to Control plus click for multi-cursor. And then the second side note is about setting column selection as the default behavior instead of line wrapping selection. And you can also do that here in the selection entry of the menu bar, and then here column selection mode. So now you can see this is enabled, and now if I select something here, we have this column selection. And again, if you click this here, then you go back to the line wrapping behavior. Okay, so those are my notes for multiple cursors and selections. So then the next side note is about Overtype Mode. And you can toggle that via the command palette with this command here. And what it does is it lets you override existing characters at the cursor position instead of inserting them. So to show you what I mean by that, I've prepared here again some example. And here, let's say in the stock string, we now want to rename this handle into username. So if you do that in insert mode, if I here simply type username, then this here is not aligned anymore. So we would have to adjust that again so that it is here aligned again. And this can be easier done with Overtype Mode. So therefore, let's undo this here. And now let's do this in Overtype Mode. So therefore, open the command palette and then here search for Overtype and then run this. So now we are in Overtype Mode, as you can see on the status bar, and also the cursor has changed. And now if I rename this here to username, then we're overtyping the existing characters and this here stays aligned. Okay, so now to deactivate it, we can again use the command palette or simply click this element here. So then here, lastly, the last note here is about some related settings. So you can adjust, for example, the overtype cursor style, or you can enable overtype on paste. Okay, so those are my notes for the overtype mode. So then the last side note is about different selections via clicking with the mouse. Namely, by double clicking, you can select a word. By triple clicking, you can select a line. So 1, 2, 3, and then I have the whole line. And if you quadruple click, you can select the whole file. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I have selected the whole file. Okay, so this is the last side note. And with that, now we've covered all the notes that I wanted to cover with respect to code editing. So now we've reached the end of this video, and then in the next video, we will go over the notes for code navigation. So thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.